Well, gentlemen, welcome back to the Minczeski Show. That is how you pronounce that. Minczeski. It's said wrong every time. It's not Seth Rogen, it is Minczeski. I've been hearing that a lot more lately. I guess he's in the limelight a little more. How are the two of you doing?
Very well.
Doing great, Andrew Minczeski.
Minczeski. Season 4, how does that feel?
It feels like season 4. Yeah. Like it feels like we've been doing this a while now, that's for sure. And
Yeah,
with where we're at right now too, with what we're working on for future episodes, we're in the weeds of some pretty important stuff. So season 4 was a blast.
Oh, nice. That's fantastic. So you've got plans for season 5, I take it?
Oh yeah, big plans.
Do you guys have an end in sight? Is there a season or a series finale that you're looking forward to, or is this something that you hope keeps developing and you can keep going for as long as it feeds you?
Oh, there's an end in sight for sure. Let's leave it at that.
All right, not too many spoilers, huh?
Right.
So let's get to know the two of you a little bit better. Pastor Joel, I'm familiar with you being a very voracious reader. I'm curious, what would be your top 3 book recommendations?
Oh, geez. I do read a lot, so that makes that question a little tougher.
No, I'm sure.
I'll keep this to what I would recommend to what I would say the average listener for the What the Flock podcast.
Okay.
And I actually can draw on them right here for you. Number 1, a nonfiction book, How to Read a Book.
Okay.
This book, it may be silly to have a How to Read a book because you need to learn how to read before you can read a How to Read a book. But what this really does, a lot of what we're doing in What the Flock is helping people have the right mentality about these topics so that they can get their thought process in the right spot before they step into a situation like this, or a tough situation that deals with one of the topics of damage, or when a situation comes upon them, they have the information they need to be able to handle it well. In this book, yes, it's specific about how to read a book, but the information in it it's really about where are you putting your brain before you approach a piece of literature, including the Bible. So the information in this book will definitely help a person read the Bible among any literature. I would just say the Bible being the most difficult to interpret accurately. If you can interpret the Bible accurately, you can interpret anything accurately. And this book does give some tips that will help a person approach the Bible in a way where the least amount of their prior biases will impact what they're reading. I'd say number 2, Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis, classic. I feel like it's a classic Christian book that is very well known and well loved, and I think still ahead of its time in a lot of ways. And then I would also say another classic, Man's Search for Meaning.
I haven't heard of that.
This book is a memoir by a gentleman, a Jewish man who lived through the Holocaust and was in concentration camps, and also developed, he was a psychiatrist. He also developed a philosophy, a psychiatry practice through what he learned in the concentration camps, called logotherapy. And a lot of what he was dealing with was, I actually preached a sermon based off of what I learned in this book. And the point he made was, there's a gap between whatever the situation I'm dealing with and how I respond to it. That gap is my responsibility. So really, this book, not only is it heartbreaking and really intriguing and inspiring, because it's not just him teaching his logotherapy stuff, it's him explaining a lot of the atrocities that happened in the Holocaust, his own personal experiences, but it's all a man who went through some of the most extreme suffering that anybody could have experienced, essentially telling the world, it's up to you how you respond to your suffering. And to have a man who's been through the Holocaust and live in concentration camps say that kind of removes anybody's ability to call BS on him because of what he went through. It's like, if he had the ability to do that in the concentration camps, I haven't been through anything nearly that severe.
Yeah.
So those would be 3 recommendations that I think would help, really kind of along the same audience that I think would be interesting for people who like our podcast.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I just got 3 new book recommendations. I don't
Nice.
I started Mere Christianity a few years ago, but I moved and I didn't pick it back up.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah. All right. Well, Pastor Jonathan, along a similar thread of thought, I know that you are a talented musician. Do you have 3 song recommendations for our listeners?
Ooh. 3 song recommendations. I would say one would be I would check out Arcade Fire as a band in general. It's my probably my favorite band today. I would check out basically any song on Reflector. I would probably go with Porno if I could suggest one to listen to.
Okay.
It's an amazing song about taking a look at the culture and what it is to actually be a man. So
Nice.
that's an awesome song. I would say if you haven't heard, there's an artist called Sam Fender that I'm really excited about. He's kind of a newer guy from England, and he's the album that just came out is called, or not just came out, but they came out, his last release is called 17 Going Under. So if you want to check out that song, I recommend Sam Fender 17 Going Under. Again, another, kind of a look at what his life was like growing up. He lives in North Shields, which is like in England, like northern England area, kind of a tough place. And then 3 songs to check out. Well, if you haven't heard, let's see. I'm trying to think of a Beatles song. How about there's so many. Let's do like you gotta listen to something from Sgt. Pepper's if you are so maybe check out Strawberry Fields Forever by the Beatles. So I'm just
when
like,
I first got into vinyl,
yeah,
that was one of the records my parents had, and so I would listen to that over and over again. I think I still have it, but it is definitely worn out. It will not play through a single song without scratching.
There you go. Yep, cool songs to check out. I think Strawberry Fields Forever is pretty common that people have heard it, but gotta give props to those guys. So yeah,
it's the Mere Christianity of Beatles songs.
Super
everybody's
popular.
heard of it, but it's still appreciated.
Yeah, I think it was such a cultural phenomenon and shift.
Fantastic. So I asked these 2 questions to the 2 of you because I feel like you're both very dynamic in how you work together. you've got these great different skill sets that really mesh well and result in this podcast that I've heard amazing things from people about. I like it. And when I hear about other people liking it, it makes sense because it's these two guys who have I would say completely different skill sets in a lot of ways, just meshing and really building on top of each other and making something that's better than either would be able to make alone. So I want to really highlight that. And I think another way to highlight that would be to go, we're talking a lot about helping people with problems that they're experiencing in church. So I'm curious, what is your favorite problem to deal with?
Oh, honestly, what we're doing and what the flock is really my favorite problem to deal with. Is not even necessarily to the specificity of hurting people with church damage. I care about the doctrine, that aspect of it, and my favorite problem to fix would be the contradictions that people have just from what the church has taught. And I guess church damage does come into play because that's my favorite aspect of church damage that I like to fix. There is something special about teaching somebody who has no church experience at all and no pushback on what the truth is you're delivering to them, people who are just hungry for it. That is great. But there's something even more special about people who've been through the dirt and have been damaged and whose lives have crumbled, and the doctrine, that same doctrine that I might teach somebody who's never heard of this information at all, teaching it to somebody who has a grasp of what Christianity's made of, but the how and why they've been given their whole lives has caused them harm mentally and emotionally and spiritually. Being able to give truth, and really the pleasure is in, I like seeing that big aha moment, right, as a teacher, but there's something really incredible about seeing God's truth do its work and seeing the doctrine that God has made available to us repair the lives of people, and see how when I have God's truth, which all truth is God's truth, none of the truth we're delivering is anything we came up with. And when I understand it the way God intends me to, and I deliver it to people the way God intends me to, and they receive it the way God intends them to, you get to see the creativity of God, the life-giving aspects of what God wants for us. And it's just like, that's why I love what I'm doing. It's just, and then I enjoy it at this really ultimate level of, like, I've had, actually, I think you may have asked me this question, Andrew, just a couple of weeks ago, is like, why do you do what you do? And my answer was just simply because I love living on this earth and I enjoy life. And when I've been able to embrace who God created me to be, I've been able to solve these problems that He's facilitated me encountering with people because of the information He's given me, and being able to just kind of be a part and play with the tools God's given me to impact the world. I get to see the world become a better place, and I get the joy of being able to be a part of that. So those would be my favorite. It's really, for me, it all comes down to doctrine.
That makes absolute sense given what I know about you. But one thing you said really struck me: God as a creator, as a creative. And I think it's really common that we talk about creation, God as the creator, but God being creative. That just makes me think about more like God as an artist.
Oh,
His
yeah.
paintbrush, his canvas is doctrine.
Yeah, that it is. And you know, and then what we see is like every, you know, not only do we have the 6 days of creation that's just basically has every resource he ever needed was there, right? But and you see every individual person is an expression of that as well. So yeah, he's his creativity is infinite, and it is, and how he delivers that creativity and is through truth and through doctrine, and it just manifests itself differently in different people's lives. So I see people's lives change and transform and repair. It's different every time. So I can teach the same information and it's different every time I teach it because I deliver it differently based on who it is. They receive it differently based on who they are and based on the experiences they've had and based on what they're working through. So it's different every time. And it's just, it's like improv, where you're part of this improv troupe with God the Father, with Jesus his son, with the Holy Spirit, and you've been a part of this improv troupe since, for me, since I was 25, and we practice every week, every day. And one of the things that's cool about, you know, if you hear these professional improvisers, every night's different. That's one of the things they get high on. It's like,
Yeah.
every night's different. And it's like, that's what it's like. But at the same time, they're doing the same improv games. You know, they got 12 things they rotate through. But even if they do those same 12 improv games and they're rotating through those every week or whatever, it's different every time you do it. And yeah, that's where, I mean, even, and this happens even in our episodes, me and Pastor Jonathan have an idea of what we're going to say. We're not just winging it, right? We know what the topic is that we're covering in every episode. And we know what the ultimate answer is going into it. But I never know what the episode's going to turn into. I don't know what Pastor Jonathan, like, I have an idea of what he's going to be bringing me through. We have this arc, this outline that we go through, this progression. But I don't know the questions that he's going to ask. And I think he's in the same position. He doesn't know what I'm going to say, to the point, and he doesn't know how he's going to respond to it. So every episode's different, and that's just what it's like to live a life with the Lord, and why it doesn't ever get boring.
The first thing I thought of when you said, and every episode is different, is Pastor Jonathan has never screamed "What the flock" the same way twice.
Yeah.
So, no. Pastor Jonathan, what about you? What's a problem that you love solving?
I love to help people who are stuck. You know, people who want to grow that are essentially stuck. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to get forward. And specifically in the being stuck part would be, I am very focused on boys becoming men and facilitating that. Like, I think that is a massive problem in our culture. It's like definitely on the forefront of my brain because of, you know, there's some growing men's groups that I'm facilitating and a part of recently. So this is a major problem that it seems like every problem that we face on a day-to-day basis can go back to some sort of male in our life causing damage, or us being that male that's causing damage. Right. And so that's what I'm really passionate about. I'm really excited to see this. I'd love to see this boy problem go away and help males become men.
I see it all the time in the schools.
Yep.
Just a bunch of guys trying to prove that they're manlier.
Yeah, there really isn't a process to help boys become men that I've seen. And so you know, developing and running a program that does that has been incredibly rewarding, you know, for myself and a lot of us that have been a part of it. It's like this transition in our lives that we have always desired, but maybe never had structure around it to help us actually feel settled in what it means to be a man.
It's beautiful. Okay. So, on to the topics that we're here to discuss. Church versus business. Now, this one thing I really thought about as I was listening to you guys talk through this. What about Christian businesses? You've got the church part, you've got the business part. How is that supposed to work? Should we be more focused on the business side? Should we be more focused on the Christian side? Is it wrong to take a profit in that situation? Is it really Christian anymore if it's too businessy? Help me understand.
I think it's okay. What I would say is that the important thing is that you're just honest with whatever the services you're providing. If you're a church, it's meant to be, I offer this benefit to you as a person. I use resources to offer that benefit. But the cause is, the driver behind this whole thing is, I want to give you this benefit. And as the church, that's really the gospel message. It's salvation, sanctification, replication, discipleship, right? If I'm a Christian business, that's, I guess what we're saying is, I am a business. I'm just running it with Christian morals or ethics. I would just say, let's just be honest that the goal you have, whether you're a construction company that has named your construction company, Builders for Christ, the goal is for you to make money. And you do it by providing a service. You build houses, or you build, you construct whatever it is. The issue that we have, and even in the episode, if you listen, our issue isn't that there's anything wrong with business. The issue is when those things get lumped together. And especially when the church portrays itself as offering this service to people, is really more focused on making the money or gathering resources than it is on benefiting others.
Yeah, I would say a Christian business ought to be a business that is moral, right? So I would say that a Christian business is not a church. It is a business. But the goal of that business that's a Christian business ought to be morality. You ought to be, not only paying your workers at a, market level rate or whatever, but that you would essentially be, no, we're going to treat you more excellently than how the world would treat you, or we're going to have principles or standards that are a bit higher than what the world is. And so therefore you might be more generous, or you might be more, you might give more as an organization, as a Christian organization, to other nonprofits or what have you, or even giving money to the church. But the whole focus is on gathering resources, not studying the apostles' doctrine, prayer, fellowship, and breaking bread. It's let's make money in a moral way. Awesome. Let's make an impact in a let's make money, let's make an impact in a moral way. Great. That's an amazing, to Pastor Joel's point, there's nothing wrong with a business looking to do that. And in fact, it could be incredibly rewarding for people. To be working, going, well, we do want to make money, but we also want to help people and bring them towards Jesus. It's like, yeah, that will be awesome. And hopefully whatever that Christian business is doing, they don't need to just tell people, we're doing this for Jesus, we're doing this for Jesus, we're doing this for Jesus, we're Christian, we're Christian, we're Christian. Hopefully their actions show that.
Right.
Yeah, they're not just naming
evading
their...
Yeah,
exactly.
They're not evading taxes.
Company. Right.
Give unto Caesar what's Caesar's. Evading taxes. Yeah. Both of those. Beautiful. Is that
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense to me. So it's still a business, and I heard this saying, and I really like it. The business of business is business. Still hits that, but you'd want to hold yourself to a higher standard. It's not, well, legally we can get away with. No, we're moral.
Bingo.
right,
Beautiful.
right.
Thank you. That's a fantastic answer. So within that idea is a church that has been being run as a business. And we've all encountered this. This is so incredibly common. I think this is one of the most common ways that people are hurt by church is, hey, I needed help, but you didn't help me because I didn't give you money. How can a church that has been distracted by running itself like a business make that transition or start to make that transition into being a church the way Christ intended?
Well, I got two things. One, get the senior pastor or whoever's in charge of the church's hands out of the money. And then two, get a however your church is run, if it's elder run or congregation or whatever, like whatever your board is, whatever this governing leadership body over your church, I would have as soon as possible a meeting discussing the things that Pastor Jonathan just said earlier. How are we embracing and helping our community with the apostles' doctrine, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayer? So let's go back to that. But the number one thing, the quickest fix is get the senior pastor or whoever's at the top of this pyramid, because we call it a pyramid or an upside down, whatever. When it's a business, it is a pyramid. There's a guy at the top, and that's the problem. If that guy's hands are in the money, that's probably the number one issue.
So if you want to if your church is operating like a business and you want to help it be more like a church, who is around the pastor that confronts the pastor? Or who's the leadership in the church? And is there someone that can kick those people's butt? Because the quickest way to make, the quickest way to make anything, to turn any church into a monopoly, or the quickest way to turn a church into a business is to have someone who answers to no one in the church who's in charge.
Whether that's a senior pastor or a board of trustees or a financial team, whatever you want to call it, who can get their eyes and hands and words into that group of people or that person, whatever they call themselves. That's great. That's a great point, PJ.
Beautiful. So I think that ties very nicely into the topic of spiritual reward. This is a huge topic. I think every religion has some version of this. I mean, we look at karma. We can look at reincarnation. You want to die having built up more karma than you spent, so that when you're reincarnated, you would be reincarnated as something better.
Like
that, even
not a cockroach.
It's everywhere. So help me understand, why is this such a controversial teaching in the Christian church?
It comes down.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, PJ. Okay, I'll start. Why is it so controversial? Why is it so controversial? Is because, oftentimes in the modern day church, if you do any good works, it's essentially like you're trying to replace Jesus and the work that Jesus has done. Right? So anytime I'm going to say I'm going to do this thing to get a reward, people go, well, Jesus is your reward.
Okay.
So there's these two concepts that are majorly together in the church: salvation and reward. And so everyone thinks that when you do something for a reward, that it is just being religious, like meaning you're trying to effort or exert or get your way to be saved. Like you're oh, okay, so you're going to give money to the poor, you're going to volunteer because you're trying to earn your salvation. That's what people hear when they say, if I were to say, well, I'm going to do that to earn some reward, to do this and this and this thing. They're like, wait a minute, you're going to do something to get this benefit that's exceeding your salvation. People just hear that and they go, it just sounds like you're trying to get yourself saved through works. I don't get it.
Sure.
But I think that's where a lot of it starts, is that when I was growing up in the church, I didn't really hear the concept of reward. And I knew that there was salvation. And I felt like, growing up in the church, that Jesus was my reward. And so as good as it gets is being saved. But there's so much more. And reward is a major part of that.
Yeah, and I'd recommend to people listening to season 4, you go back and listen to the reward episode we did. Because reward and spiritual value, those episodes could definitely work really well together, even though they're a whole season apart. I think that was season 3 we did reward, but because one of the things that so there's 2 things I really want to hit. One is in a result of what PJ just said, because I love the point you made, bringing reward into this. I think there's this immediate feeling of negativity when it comes to we gain anything, because one, replace it, it automatically is seen as working for your righteousness, or working for your salvation, really. And it's deemed as selfish, which even that, it's automatic. If you do something for your own benefit, it's automatically seen as a bad thing. Although Matthew chapter 6 is an entire chapter, a third of the Sermon on the Mount Jesus spent showing us how we can benefit ourselves in the right way, in the right manner, for the right reason. But I think a big part, as far as the mentality, the thought process, I think really it comes down to this. If I'm responsible for gaining spiritual value by my good works, again, not salvation, but reward, I gain spiritual value, then I'm also responsible for the bad I've done. So this whole idea of no reward, no spiritual value, it's all God's, sounds great. God's good. He's my reward. It sounds great. But I really think it's an trying to escape of judgment to the bad I've done. Because when I'm not responsible, that's the benefit of these denominations that don't believe we have free will. The benefit is I don't have to answer for all the garbage I've done. I'm not to blame for anything. And I think it's really along that same mentality of, there's a responsibility. Yes, there's this great, but legitimately, there is this great benefit we have in being able to gain value based on how well we love others and based on how well we handle injustice towards us. But there's a responsibility to that as well. And the responsibility is what I think people are running away from when they hear this, because that responsibility also means they're judged when they do something bad. And that's, I think, one of the big things humanity's trying to run from altogether is, and if you go back to what PJ was saying, it's all just trying to duck the responsibility. We're just trying, Jesus is my reward. He's my salvation. I'm trying to get as much of the attention off of me and my behavior as possible, as much of the responsibility of the decisions I've made off of me as possible, because I don't want to be wrong. Because God forbid I might go to hell. And at least that's the mentality I think a lot of Christians have. So I think there's a couple reasons, but I think this is more deeply rooted into really the flaw of humanity in general, is we're just trying to duck responsibility and trying to get away with things and not really embracing the fact that God is just, justice is real, karma is real. When we put good out, good will come back. When we put bad out, bad will come back. I think that's what we're running from.
Yeah.
Is that responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, and that's an amazing point, PJ. One of the things that we talk about in the episode is that spiritual value is what we accumulate from our righteousness.
Yeah.
And right there is like, ooh, people get really uncomfortable. What do you mean, our righteousness?
Right. Yeah.
Because the immediate verse that I feel like everyone wants to follow that up with is, our righteousness is as filthy rags.
Yep.
However, that doesn't mean that we don't have righteousness.
Yeah.
That does not
It's
mean,
just
it just
on the
means long
spectrum
term.
of righteousness. There's, God's righteousness, which is just perfect and holy, and then there's our righteousnesses, which is really filthy and dirty. And the spectrum is just the amount of dirt on that righteousness. It's all the same righteousness spectrum, though. But
it's like when you were a teenager and you thought you had cleaned your room, and you look back now years later, you go, I didn't know what clean meant.
And it really comes down to, who's the cause? Is this God through me? Am I being obedient, letting him work through me? Or is this an idea I came up with? Even if God's given me permission to do it, even if I'm inviting him along, like, hey, God, I have this idea. And we cover it at length in the episode, but it is,
right.
It's filthy as rags, but it's still righteousness.
That's right.
And in comparison to the righteousness that will enable me to have eternal life, you betcha it's filthy as rags.
Yeah, but if I have righteousness, again, to your point, Pastor Joel, if I have righteousness, then I'm responsible with what I do with that righteousness.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's kind of scary.
It is.
That makes a lot of sense, guys. What this makes me think of is, I recently read a letter about citing some book that was written as heretical, and one of the points in that letter was, this seems to fly in the face of centuries of traditional Christian theology. And just hearing you guys talk about this, it kind of reminds me of that, because, well, this idea of working for your salvation, that was at one point traditional Christian theology.
Yeah, it was.
And it makes me wonder how that changes over time, how we currently think, well, this is what we've been teaching for ever since the days of Jesus. And I'm just curious what you guys think of that, and what you think of, how these traditions kind of cycle through, and how to know when we can just drop something, and how to know when this has great importance. We want to cleave to this.
Yeah. I find it fascinating how many logical fallacies the Christian community adheres to, when every other community outside of the church looks at it like you just completely invalidated yourself by using these logical fallacies. The fact that because we've always taught it this way is a laughing stock of a reason or a support to anybody outside the church. You've just completely removed your you have no reputation of an expert in your field if that's what your argument is. Mm-hmm. Which is the same thing as when I go after you asking questions about what degrees do you have? Anything off topic that is off of the path of the doctrine that's being discussed as a support for why this is right or wrong, it ends up going down a path of logical fallacies. So for us, it's always about, what's the point you're making? What's the definition or the reason behind it, the cause behind it? And do you have support from outside of yourself for that thing? Meaning, because here's another logical fallacy, which is very similar to this. It's always been taught that way. It's, well, this is what I believe, or this is what I was taught, or even me, I could use my own degrees. Well, I have a master's degree. Yes, you do, Joel. That doesn't mean you're right about what you believe. Just like the church isn't right about what it believes because this is what they've taught for 500 years. Grace is defined as unmerited favor since Martin Luther's day, which is almost 500 years ago, or about, right around 500 years, right? So I would say maybe due to the fact that it's been 500 years gives us maybe earns some respect to us at least doing our due diligence to maybe study and research the topic. But the fact that it's been believed to be unmerited favor for 500 years doesn't mean that that's right. So it's just logical fallacies. That's when everything is the first thing I think of is Christians are the worst at supporting what they believe logically and objectively than any community I've ever experienced.
Yeah, I feel like because it's just, if you base your whole belief on, if the core of your belief or the highest of your moral code is it's a mystery, and therefore anything that can be explained is not of God.
Yeah.
And that's it's so frustrating, because that's what happens, is that because Joel and I believe we can explain why Jesus is fully man and fully God, and we start to explain how Jesus is fully man and fully God, as we start to explain it, people go, "You don't believe that Jesus is fully man and fully God." And it's like, no, I do. We do believe that. We are supporting our belief. But if you can't support your belief, and it's a mystery, so just believe who Jesus was, you're the enemy if you can start explaining stuff. And it just makes people insecure who have spent their whole life trying to say that there's not an answer.
Yeah, and we get accused of basically taking the power out of these pillars of our faith by being able to explain it, as if the power lies in the fact that it's so big and important of a topic you can't understand it. And we've covered that in some of our episodes where it's like, man,
I remember that
this has gotten so backwards that the support for a belief is greater when you can't explain it. That's how far the church has gone the other way. If I can't explain it, it actually is going to validate me even more, because then it's this mystery that, we must not be, God's too big for us to understand. So I get, like, I think I get, like, I can probably argue why people believe, like, because people want to believe God is this so big and so, like, so far from me to be able to understand, like, as if that makes him this bigger and better being. So I understand the intent there, but it ends up hurting people because the behavior out of that is wrong, and people walk around, and what ultimately ends up happening is our faith is based on a feeling.
Right.
And then my obedience to God and what he's trying to tell me to do is based on how I feel. And if something I feel different or uncomfortable about becomes bad and wrong, can very easily turn from God's truth, which is tweaky, being attributed as something from the devil. I'm not going to do it. I feel wrong about I feel wrong about this. Means I'm not going to do it. Means it wasn't God. And there's plenty of things that God has told me to do that my immediate thought and feeling about it was like, you got to be kidding me. I don't want to do this. It's the last thing I want to do. So that's, this, I don't even remember what the original question was, but yeah, you get me riled up talking about the thought process of.
I think I tried to do that once in an interview.
Sure. See how far Joel can run a commentary hole. Yeah.
See if I can get him to forget the question.
Yeah.
So, but back to spiritual value. The one question I had through the episode is, I was thinking of the parable of the talents. The one servant who was encouraged to have, at the very least, put his money in the bank to get interest on it. If we're thinking of that, and I'm running off the premise that this is an allegory, that we aren't all literally born with gold talents that we need to make more on before we die. But what does that look like? Spiritual reward, value-wise, how can we apply that to ourselves? What is our very least to get interest? What would this look like for a church to make sure that they're being good stewards with the value that God has given them?
with the man who merely gained interest, at least had an interaction with one other person with his talent. I'd say that, like, ultimately what we'd want, and I think the greatest and most faithful of the servants in that parable were the ones that were most profitable, meaning they had their talents, they used their talents, and they benefited other people with their talents. And that's why there was this profitability because of the exchange. I'd say at the minimum level, it was just this, the least profitable servant, who was still profitable, or he would have been had he put his talent in a bank and gained interest, would have at least used his talent in some fashion. Whether his intent was to benefit somebody else or whatever, at least he used it and made something more out of it, whether the return was as great as it could have been or not. So I'd say my advice would be, at minimum, just try to understand who God created you to be, and make something more with what you've been given. I'm not saying how much, just something more.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like, what would be the smallest thing that you could do is, what is the value that you've received, and can you share that with someone else? So yeah, I think we hear that a lot, which is pass it on. So
yeah, pay it forward.
Yeah, and pay it forward. Yeah, exactly. Pay it forward. So with the ways that I've been helped and the things that I've learned, the only way that I'm going to feel settled about that is that I need to take value, or I need to receive the value that's given to me by other people, the love that I've received, and give it to other people. Because, I've had a couple different strategies with that. Someone gives me a value and I go, no, I shouldn't receive that. I'm a piece of garbage. I don't deserve that value. And then I feel unsettled by that. Or this person gives me value and starts loving me, and I go, maybe you should limit the amount that you're giving to me. Like, I'll just take a little bit less over time. So it's like, this person goes, I want to talk to you every week, Jonathan. I want to help you. I want to coach you. And I go, well, how about every other week, so that I don't take too much from you? Or, why don't I just give back to that person? Let me just sit and think and ask God, how can I give back to that person who gave to me, who loved me? But ultimately, the thing that's going to be the most settling is to recognize that you gave them a value, and to pass that on or pay that forward towards other people. That's what's really going to feel settling. And I think that's what sets us up to receive more from God through other people, is if we take that value and share it. So we get a talent from someone goes, here you go. Now what do I do with it? I want to invest it. I want to use it. I want to, experience more from that.
That is awesome. And that just reminds me of the problem that you want to solve, is helping boys act like men. I remember you were one of the main men who helped me learn how to be a man. I can pay that forward by helping someone else learn how to be a man.
And that's what's gonna feel great. And so instead of feeling guilty because people are giving, it's like, just continue to pay it forward, and you won't feel guilty about people giving to you, because they're going to gain more spiritual value and reward as a result of them giving to you. So you're going to be joyful at receiving and being joyful in giving. So it's great.
Yep. And that's usually when, I know I've heard Jonathan say this time and time again, when people who he's helped have asked him, how can I repay you? It's go and help somebody else with what you've been given.
Well, I have one last question, just one more. Pastor Joel, I have heard through the grapevine, and actually directly from you, that you're getting a doctorate in theology.
Yes. Yeah.
Is that right, in theology?
Yeah, a doctor of ministry in theology and apologetics.
So amazing. I want to know why, and what are you hoping to do with it?
Well, I believe God wanted me to.
Okay.
That's like I got plenty of confirmation on that path. And really, I guess it's why and what I plan kind of is the same answer. It's because of what I want to do with it. That's why I'm doing it. And ultimately, it's all towards this path I believe God has me on to eventually becoming a university professor. So, and in the field in which I'm studying too, not just any university professor, but I want to teach people doctrine who actually want to learn it, and teach people who also are passionate about discipleship and leadership and doctrine in and of itself and theology. So really, I chose the theology and apologetics path because they didn't have a degree of doctor of doctrine. So theology and apologetics was about as close as you could get to like just this overarching idea of what's the big pillar pieces that make up our faith about who God is, and how do we argue that. That's the apologetic side of it. So it's like, what are these big beliefs that make up this big non-contradictory worldview that God holds, and how do I argue for that worldview?
That's fantastic. How's the pathway going so far?
So far, it's great. I mean, honestly, I am a doctrine hound, so I feel like I'm in my first semester right now, and classes are quantitatively, there's a lot of work. Qualitatively, it's pretty simple for me. I literally had a conversation with Pastor Jonathan last week, telling him about one of my assignments, and I said, basically the final paper for this class I'm in right now will be me using the series I just preached about spiritual maturity. And I said, but I'm going to have to dumb it down a little bit. And he laughed. He laughed. I didn't hear what I said the way he heard what I said, but what he heard me say was, and he repeated it to me. He's like, oh man, this is just incredible. You're in doctorate level college classes at seminary right now, and you're saying you have to dumb down the information that Music of Life Church and that really our podcasts are teaching to fit the level of the doctorate program you're in. So yeah, it's just, but it's not mine. This is just truth. Yeah. So it's like, and I was talking to another friend of ours, and I'm like, so what level of academia is above the doctorate level? And it's like, there isn't one. It's just what a lot of the things we're teaching, it's truth. And a lot of it is revelatory to people. But it's still at that same doctorate level. It's just not everybody has it. So it's very unique. It's a very unique situation that I'm in. So really, I feel like whatever's being thrown at me from these classes that I'm in so far, it's been not easy because it's a big workload, but simple because they throw this big assignment at me. And it's like, I immediately use the same model we have for the podcast. Is like, well, there's a loose side, there's a strict side, and there's an ultimate answer. And I just put whatever the topic is through that spectrum and through that model. And then it's just a matter of fulfilling the requirements that my professors give me for these papers and these projects. But as far as the answers themselves, because we have God's doctrine at such a wide level and a wide foundation, it's not only deep, it's as deep as you can get, but it's really wide, the base we're covering. It's been a great experience. I'm really looking forward to being a professor someday. That's definitely the path I see God have me on. Yeah.
I remember we used to joke about you wearing the tweed suit with the elbow pads.
Yeah, with the elbow pads. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it for you.
Thank you.
This is excellent. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. This has been another great, excellent, enjoyable interview. You guys make this so easy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Talk to you later.